Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I am still Michael.
And we are still covering Princess Mononoke.
Yeah, welcome back, bitch.
Yeah,
We're doing
the
it.
deep dive.
Doing the deep dive.
The deep dive of one of the Japanese classics from Studio Ghibli that apparently neither of us maybe quite connected with.
Yeah,
as much as
this
we
is
would
going to
like
be, it's kind of funny. Before we started recording, we very briefly looked at each other, and Blake was kind of like, did you like this movie? And I was like, kinda. Did you? And you were like, kinda. And then we both shared this look of like dismay where it's like, oh shit.
Well, why don't we share, and this is obviously the deep dive, the spoiler-full episode, so if you haven't seen this one, go back and check out the primer, but why don't we start out with our biggest gripes? Because Jess and I were very much on the same page with our biggest gripe with the movie, and I kind of get the vibe that I think you did as well. And I think it was one thing that you said before we started recording.
Okay.
We'll circle back to the first act, but I think the first act, short as it may be, is really, really strong and compelling, and like really kind of just gets you on board with where the story's going.
I think the first 20 or 30 minutes in particular are actually quite strong.
I very much agree.
Like everything from Princess Sheeta leaving his village to entering Iron Town and then, you know, meeting San and then leaving Iron Town. I'm all like, this is good. I'm on board, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like the boar demons, really compelling in the first scene, right? Like this is suddenly this like monstrous menace that has, you know, approached everybody. And I feel like now I kind of want to talk about some of like the beginning because it is so good. We'll circle back to my concerns later.
Yep.
I really, really do love the setup, right? Like there's this kind of like this tragic backstory and you're fabled to die essentially now because you sacrificed yourself essentially to save the village.
Right. Like his younger sister specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the way,
Yeah.
I wish they'd done more with that character, but like he sacrifices himself to protect his sister. He leaves. She gives him like a little locket, and he's very much just like, I gotta go. I gotta go die. See you later.
Yeah, but I thought that was really good. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because I play video games and like it's kind of like this inciting thing, and then you know, like you go from being like this overpowered badass to like, you know, suddenly you're just out on the wilderness on your own kind of thing and just trying to survive.
It really establishes the stakes really well. You know, it's funny. Again, I'm working on a new book right now, and one of the problems I've had with it is that I feel like my first act took too long. So then watching this movie, I'm like, oh shit, you can just do it that quickly, huh? Just
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, and it's really cool too because there's kind of some things that this movie does between the prince leaving his village and kind of getting to Irontown. Like when he has his meeting with the monk, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like, is this story going where we're going to assemble a team kind of thing?
Yeah,
and then it doesn't quite do that.
It doesn't quite do that, right? And then, you know, there's also the thing where like there's a big fight that happens between the Ironworks people and the forest spirits. Princess Sheeta happens across these two dudes, and like he again goes out of his way to help these guys. And again, I'm like, okay, like I really like this guy. Like he's really a good dude, right?
Yeah.
And then we get to Ironwork, and we like meet, you know, the lady. Everybody just calls her Milady, so I'm just gonna call her that too. And then blah, 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 blah. There's also that like first fateful encounter with San where he spies her from across the village, and she's like sucking the blood out of like her wolf mom's wound, and then she turns and sees him, and she's got like the blood all over her mouth, and then he's like, oh my god, that's so hot. And then
it's very visually striking.
Yeah, right.
That's after kind of the first clash between the Irontown people and the wolves, and then he ends up down at the river with the two Ironworks guys who survive the attack. Yeah, no, all of that's really strong. And even like when we get to Irontown, I'm like, oh, this is like, you know, like Irontown and Lady Eboshi. I'm like, this is a really nuanced character. Like Lady Eboshi is one of the most nuanced animated characters I've ever seen on screen.
Yeah. So like when we first meet her, she's steering her men up this cliff with all this rice. And then the wolf demon attacks, and she like guides her men into strike.
Not demon yet. Not demon yet.
Right.
They don't turn into demons until they get mad.
Until they get real mad. So
Until they get Mononoke.
right. So it's just a perfectly harmless wolf god who's biting people. But and then she actually delivers like a really solid blow and repels it. In the process, a bunch of guys go over the cliff, right?
Yeah.
And Gonzo's like, what do we do about our men? And she's just kind of like, yeah, they're dead. Let's keep moving, right?
Right.
So you're like, okay, this is a woman of like steely focus and like very little sentiment, right?
Right.
But then when we get to Ironworks, we find that it's mostly populated by outcasts. Like all the women are like rescued prostitutes. There's like gunsmiths who are actual lepers. Mm-hmm. One of them even takes the point of saying like, oh, Lady Eboshi showed us mercy and like gave us a purpose. And like one of them even says like she comes down here and like washes our wounds for us.
Yeah, there's something really poignant about everything that you have to see in the Iron Town, right?
Right. So like, okay, you're like, this is a woman of clearly like she's got slightly sinister motives, but she's also like a very like shockingly compassionate person.
Right. I don't know. I thought that she was really strong, and like I was kind of like, I kind of sat back in my chair as the more and more kind of her character unraveled, because I was like, oh, this is like, this is something I haven't seen before. This is a character that isn't quite the hero and isn't quite the villain. Like they're in this world and doing their best to support the people around them. And like, I can understand why they're doing what they're doing, right? Like,
yeah,
I always was like, oh, like I really can't kind of decide on whether I like this character or like I support this character or not.
She's clearly, I'd say she's an antagonist without being a villain.
Yeah.
Like she's clearly doing some shit. The movie is clearly very sympathetic towards like the environment and like the nature spirits and whatever. So like, and she's kind of on the opposite ends of that, but at the same time, it's like she's antagonistic, but she's never seems to like revel in the suffering she causes,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like there's even like when San, the titular Princess Mononoke, first storms Ironworks, she's kind of like, oh shit, she's here to kill me. And then they even have a fight where she's like, come on, like, I'll fight you mano a mano. So.
Right. Her arc of like, we have to kill the old gods, essentially, because we want Irontown to be a economic powerhouse in this region. Like, I want to support the people. Like, these are the people who have tasked me to be their leader. And, like, I could kind of appreciate that in a sense as well. There's also something, as a side note, really compelling about watching a group of people, like, trying to slay gods. Like, that's so... I don't know, cinematic is one word to put it, I guess.
Right? And I mean, I get there is some nuance here, and this is kind of what's so hard about the real world. It's like, yes, we don't want the environment to die. At the same time, we all have to go to work in the morning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so this kind of like toss up between like environmental harmony and like capitalistic survival.
And I think... that first assault on the Iron Town where Son like attacks them all, like up until this point, like I'm fully in. Like I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like I'm really excited about all of this. Like, and kind of there's this early like showdown between Son and Lady Eboshi that you almost don't expect to happen quite this early.
So early in the movie, yeah, where you're just like, okay. I do like though, Prince Asita very clearly intervenes, stopping the two of them, and there's this great shot where like he's kind of repelling both of their blades, and it's a very striking visual metaphor for like Ashida's role, where he's like the pacifist who just wants everyone to get along.
Yeah, and he's like the mediator at all times.
Kind of, yeah, and like he is an interesting protagonist in the sense that like he's kind of navigating all these different worlds, right? Like,
right.
And, maybe that's partly his background being like this prince of this, very distant village where like he's more in touch with nature than most people, but he's still a human. And
yeah, I really liked his role. And I think that when we get to the last part of the movie, like I think that this movie actually leaves his character in probably the absolute best spot that they could have.
Yeah, so...
We'll get to that later.
So so we're both kind of on board with the first 20 or 30 minutes. So when did you fall out of the movie and I'll tell you when I fell out of the movie.
I mean, it's probably the same point as you did, and it was pretty much the exact same point as Jess did. It's kind of when all of the factions start fighting and fighting each other, and it kind of, and especially too, like when off screen the battle between the boars and the humans kind of really starts to heat up.
Yeah, so maybe like it's hard to really quantify, but like
I would say like an hour 20 to an hour 30 into the movie.
yeah, like maybe I'd say like halfway through the second act or something.
Yeah.
Or like close to the beginning of the third act, but like I did a little bit of research on this movie, and this movie was distributed in the West by a little known production studio called Miramax, which was headed by a certain producer that you might have heard of named Harvey Weinstein.
A grimy little D-bag named Harvey
Yeah,
Weinstein.
giant piece of shit. Anyways, so again, in my research, I learned that Harvey Weinstein thought the movie was 20 minutes too long. And you know what? I am in the unenviable, dare I say, unconscionable position of agreeing with Harvey Weinstein.
It really sucks when you have to agree with that guy, you know?
Yeah, like I and I just want to say I agree with him on this and only this. Nothing nothing else.
I'm glad you clarified that.
It was kind of funny when I first looked at the runtime of this movie. I'm like, "Oh, this seems cuz most animated features are around like an hour and a half almost."
And this is one of the longest ever.
Yeah, it's like 2 hours 15 minutes, something like that.
Yep.
I really think there's like if there's a solid 20 minutes in the middle, they could just rip out. This would be a much stronger movie.
Yeah, and I think that it gets a little unfocused around that point in time too, when everybody's fighting with each other, the prince is being banished by the wolves, and then the wolves are fighting people and the boars, and I'm kind of confused as to who's like Jess was more confused about who was on whose side, and I kind of just kept that.
And maybe
more.
that's a slight. It seems like whenever factions start like double crossing each other, and then there's also the added wrinkle of Billy Bob Thornton's character comes back, and he has this kind of thing going on where he's working with the Emperor, and he's like has this kind of past relationship with Milady, where I'm a little like, oh, the fuck are you doing here? Like,
yeah, that he kind of shows up, and you're like, wait, is this the same character as early in the movie?
Yeah.
Like, I did also feel that as well, where it kind of took me back for a minute, and I kind of had to like regroup and try to remember like some of the conversation he had earlier, because I was actually, when he showed up, I was like, oh, this is really compelling, like this is a really cool powwow, but I didn't think much of it at that time.
Well,
more
it's
than that.
kind of funny in that when he first shows up, you think he's kind of like, you know, gonna be Ashida's sidekick or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, and there's that great scene where like Ashida's trying, like he's clearly not familiar with like the accepted currency of the world, so he's trying to pay with gold.
Yeah.
And the rice seller is kind of butthurt about it. But then Billy Bob Thornton shows up. He's like, that's gold. It's probably worth like 3 bags of rice.
Yeah.
So it's a cool scene. And then he vanishes. And then like 40 minutes later, he's coming back and he's hunting the Great Spirit with these 2 or 3 other guys who like, we don't even really know who they are.
Yeah.
He kind of alludes to the fact that they're like, you're supposed to be the greatest hunters in the lands. I'm like, and I'm sitting there like, I don't even know who the fuck these people are.
No, I agree. Like, I also think that arc is very confusing, and it kind of like disorients you a little bit.
Right. And then there's this whole thing about how he's like, oh, the Emperor wants the Great Spirit's head so he can live forever. And I'm kind of like, okay. And then the big climax of the movie is he's running away with the head, and they're chasing him down, and that's when it's kind of like, oh, like you're like essentially the main villain of this movie.
Yeah,
you're the big bad, right?
I mean, I started to get that when he was kind of, you know, steering Lady Eboshi towards like capturing the god,
I guess, right? And like, it's interesting to like introduce the big bad as like kind of like a friendly avuncular mentor type, only to then reveal that he's more sinister, but it didn't fully land for me.
I agree.
I was a little like, because even at the end, they save the day, and he's just kind of like, oh, I give up. Like, you can't fight with idiots. And then he just walks off, and I'm like, does somebody want to like pop a cap in his ass or something? Like, that'd be like if Sauron was just like, fuck it, I give up, and then just walked away.
Yeah, it doesn't quite
well,
work.
And then it's funny, even like they're wrestling with him over the head, And then at one point he like rolls down a hill and he's like, everything's under control. And it's this very like bumbling slapstick moment. And I'm like, you're the villain. Get your shit together.
And I kind of wonder if his character was necessitated by the fact that like they did want to keep Lady Eboshi to kind of be, again, that nuanced character that you're like, yeah, I can kind of like, I understand where you're coming from. And like, maybe I don't fully support the means, but I understand why you want to get to the ends that you have.
Right. And then there's also like the Boar King, who he's old and blind and voiced by Keith David, and he's basically just wants to lead the remains of his people in this one final suicide rush.
Right.
And then he kind of goes crazy at the end and becomes a demon. So then I'm like, so are you the big bad? Have you been the big bad this whole time? And then, but then that kind of gets resolved relatively swiftly, and you're just like, all right.
Well, yeah, I agree, because I think that's where Jess was confused. She was like, "Oh, are the boars the bad guys here?" And like, that is, I think, ultimately, it sounds like the deeper issue that we had is that we couldn't fully put our finger on who we were supposed to be rooting against in this movie.
Well, and then there's also like this moment when they first escape the ironworks, and there's like these monkeys throwing shit at the main guys.
And they never come back.
No,
again,
I know.
right?
I'm just kind of like, wait. You know what? Okay, I do seem to recall, and somebody might have to fact check me on this, that like Miyazaki makes his movies kind of by the seat of his pants, and he just kind of like they just kind of write it as they're going along. And again, somebody might need to fact check me on that, but it does kind of seem like this is sort of like, again, I'm gonna talk about myself right now, but like I'm in the first draft of book, and there's a lot of like stuff where it's just like, this happens, and then we're never gonna bring it up again, right? Like I feel like such an asshole being critical of like one of the greatest Japanese animated movies of all time, but I just have to admit, like when the movie ended, I was like, oh, good, it's over.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I thought the end of the movie was actually really strong. Like when they kill the forest spirit and he comes back as like a
vengeful god or something.
Yeah, and he's like the headless spirit that's consuming like everything and killing everything. I'm like, oh, this is wild. Like this is so cool. Like watching like gods be corrupted in this sense and poisoned into becoming these demons is like really compelling stuff, actually. Like I was kind of like, this is really something.
This is for me. Yeah
I liked it quite a bit. And like they eventually get the head back and it's too late. The god is dead, essentially, right? I love where this movie ends with the prince deciding to build a better town and like help with the reconstruction of the Iron Town, but also like he's kind of going to be that middleman between the town and the forest, and kind of like, we need to have a balance here, right?
And there's kind of that line with him and San, who sort of have like a romance thing going on where she's just like, I'm gonna go live in the forest. He's like, okay, well, I'll be here and I'll come visit you as often as I can.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, yeah, I bet you will.
It almost sets up like, and I mean, it crammed so much into this movie. I almost wonder if some of the conflict, if split this into like, say, 2 movies and start with one conflict and resolve one conflict, and then in a second movie, once the Iron Town has decided to like, work with the forest gods and the forest spirits and kind of live in harmony with each other. I almost wonder if in part 2 you have the monk returning and inciting, this battle between the boars and Irontown, and if that actually would have worked a little bit better instead of kind of cramming all of these different battles and factions in.
I think you just need to like start pairing stuff out and just make it a tighter, more focused movie, and like,
yeah,
I don't know,
but it's tough, right? Because like at the end of the day, a lot of the like big elements of this movie I really liked. Like the decay of gods is something that's really provocative,
right?
Super cool,
and like this whole metaphor of like environmental decline and capitalism and blah 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 blah. I was kind of like, yeah, all right, like I'm on board, but I don't know. This movie it needed to be 20 minutes shorter.
Yeah, I very much agree. And again, I almost wonder if there's two stories and two narratives in here that are actually both pretty good if you kind of separated them out. I don't think I say that very often with movies, like where it's like, oh, I kind of wish that
I feel
we
like
had
I'm
this
normally the
split.
asshole being like, no, 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 get this shit out of here. But like, yeah, no, it's. I think unfocused is the a good word for it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I very much agree with
Well, and
that. Like,
also like there are so many characters that like it's kind of hard to connect with any of them because there's just so what's his face, Billy Bob Thornton's character towards the end,
Jigo.
Jingo. He's just kind of towards the end. He kind of has this line where he's like, "Oh, it's the way of the world, kid. Like everyone wants everything." And I was kind of like, I would love to spend more time with you to figure out what your problem is, but like, but we just don't have time.
Yeah, I think that you and I are very much on the same page with this one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fighting that goes on towards the end too, like where Princess Sita at one point has to go back to Irontown and he meets the ladies and they're like, "Ah, we just fought off all the boars and blah 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 blah," and then he has to leave again to go find someone else. I'm like, did we need to come back? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and Irontown gets assaulted by, is that the Emperor's forces? Like who
Well,
assaults
that's the other thing
Irontown?
too, where there's Irontown, and then there's the wolves, and then there's the boars. There's also just like these roving bands of samurais, and I'm a little just
Yes.
like, who are these people? Like, what's their problem?
Yeah, I think focus is, you nailed it, right? Like it's just like if I had a little bit more understanding of what was going on here in this moment and who these people were and what their motivations were, I think I'd appreciate it more.
Right. You know, there's a really interesting moment where like Princess Sita wakes up and San is sleeping next to him, and he goes out into the moonlight and he has a conversation with San's wolf mom.
Hmm.
And San's wolf mom starts talking about how she met her daughter and like her human poacher parents like left her behind to like escape, and then she raised her as her own child, and then like San seems to have this whole conflict where she's like, oh, she doesn't think of herself as human, she thinks of herself as a wolf, but like,
Right.
you know, blah blah. And then like the wolf mom has a thing where she's like, she's my ugly beautiful daughter, and I'm just kind of like,
Yeah.
I would love to spend more time with you people to figure out what your problem is, but
Yeah, and I agree, and that's kind of part of this thing, right? That this movie,
I almost feel like this movie is bloated but also rushed.
yes,
Yeah, and I hate to say that about one of the most iconic movies of all time, but
yeah, well, no, and I agree, but and there's like so much of this movie too. There's kind of like an antiquated storytelling element to this, like the idea of this woman being raised by wolves, like that's something that throughout human history, like those are kind of the stories that people are drawn to, right? Like there's people who have literally children who have literally been like raised by wolves and stuff, right?
yeah.
And those stories are always just like really fascinating.
It almost the first 10 minutes I was a little like, okay, so is it kind of like Star Wars where it's sort of like a modern fairy tale? But then somewhere
Mhm.
along the way I'm like, no, it's not. It's something else. There's an old fairy tale called The Snow Queen that apparently this is sort of based on, and like you can maybe see ingredients of it along the way, but like yeah, it gets a little lost in the sauce.
I very much
This
agree.
is a stew with too many ingredients.
And I don't even like stew to begin with.
Wow, you don't like stew. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have too much else to talk about plot wise, I don't think. Like it's tough, right? Like it's funny because there's, like you said, there's a bloat to the movie, but because there's so much, like I don't even know quite how to focus on different aspects of it.
Yeah, like I think like I liked Prince Ashita, and I liked that he's kind of he's kind of forced into being like this kind of like mediator, like you said, or this like pacifist who's trying to find a better way. But like
Hmm.
every other character, I'm just kind of like, I don't know what your fucking deal is.
Yeah,
Even like
it's
you know, he saves early in the movie, he saves that guy and brings him back to Ironworks, and like that guy has a very charming relationship with his wife, played by Jada Pinkett Smith, who just keeps accusing him of being like, you know, useless and whatever. But then
oh, that was who Jada Pinkett Smith was playing. I could not figure
yeah,
out who she was.
right. So
It's funny.
but then again, it's like that character just kind of comes and goes, and you're just like, all right, well,
here's the thing is I think if you describe this movie as like this is a hero's journey fantasy film set in like 1300s in Japan, and there's this war between the industrialization of human beings and the old spirit gods of the forest.
Yeah.
And in this, you're going to see like what the decay of gods and the old world looks like, and it's really haunting in that element.
Hmm.
That sounds really compelling. It's just there's all the other stuff.
All the other stuff. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, like they had a really cool concept, and like some of the ideas in the movie are really strong, and like I'm on board with the themes of the movie and like what it's trying to tell, the stories it's trying to tell about human beings and how we just continuously disrespect like our environment, and then how the environment inevitably fights back.
Yeah. It is kind of funny. I just wanted to bring up before I forget. At one point, the boar king has been wounded, and you see all these boars in the distance, and I'm like, oh shit, like the boars have come back as demons. And then it's like, no, it's just humans wearing their pelts as shields. And I'm a little like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah, they explained it beforehand, and like you kind of knew that's where it was going if you're kind of paying attention. But it was like, yeah, I kind of wish that we had spent maybe a minute longer there, like showing the humans like getting into their boar outfits, right?
and then again, it's like, wait, are these Iron Town people or the Emperor's soldiers?
Yes.
And I'm just
Yeah.
like, whoa, 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 whoa. I did think it was kind of funny when they actually did shoot the head off the spirit god. I'm like, oh my god, you just killed a god. Like, and it's angry about it.
Yeah. No, like I said, the last like 15 minutes of the movie I thought were amazing. It's just I was a little bit too checked out by then.
Yeah.
And again, that's where I think a second viewing with the subtitles are going to be a massive improvement here, because on the second viewing, I'm going to understand more of, the different factions and who the characters are,
And like what they're doing, what they're trying to
Yeah.
accomplish.
and what their
Yeah.
motivations are. And I think that I'll appreciate it on a second run more than I did on a first. And some movies are like that, right? Like
I
there's some
guess.
movies that are complicated and they can be a little hard to follow. And like on subsequent viewing, there are things that you're just going to pick up that you didn't quite understand or miss the first time.
Yeah. I would agree.
But just even saying that though, like I don't know when I'm gonna come back to this one. This isn't like I need to watch this again. Like you and I have definitely watched those movies before, where it's like, there's something here, and I'm compelled to see this again because I need to wrap my head around this, and like it's been bouncing around my brain for like the past days or weeks since I've seen it.
Yeah.
This one's not quite there for me.
No, like I might watch this again in like another 10 years or so. I might just
Yeah.
throw it on and be like, all right.
Yeah, like if I'm in another Miyazaki phase or something, like maybe I'll come back, but it's definitely not top of the list to be rewatched.
It's certainly not top of mind, no. I'm so glad I saw it. Like,
Yes, so am I. Like, and I think that fans of fantasy don't get to eat well very often.
Yeah.
And like this is a relatively serviceable fantasy story. It's just it's got a little bit of that bloat in there.
Yep. What can you do?
So sequels, prequels, reboots. So this is somewhat based on Kurosawa's period drama genre stylization of filmmaking, which I
Okay.
found kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because you and I have kind of been on like almost like a little bit of a Kurosawa journey, right? Like
A little bit.
we started with Kurosawa, Django, which was inspired by Kurosawa. Also like Miyazaki, like a lot of probably Japanese cinema of the last 50 years is in one way or another based off of Kurosawa's works.
Right.
I think that's really interesting. Obviously, like Miyazaki I don't think he's ever made a sequel to any of his movies, so there isn't really like a this takes place in one of his other worlds. Like they're
Right.
all
It's not
very separate stories.
It's not like the Miyazaki cinematic universe or anything like that.
Which I kind of appreciate, honestly. Like I grew up alongside like Pixar, right? Like the first Toy Story movie I think came out literally like the year that I was born, I'm pretty sure.
Uh-huh.
I grew up alongside those movies, and right up until I don't even remember what the first sequel was. I feel like their first sequel was either The Incredibles or Cars 2 or something like that.
Well, it would have been Toy Story 2.
Was it? Oh, yeah, obviously
Yeah.
it was Toy Story 2. Yeah, yeah, right. I think I was pretty on board with like Pixar just telling original story after original story, and it was kind of once they started to get into their like sequel phase that I kind of was like, like
I'm
I'm not.
good. I don't need
Yeah,
this. Yeah.
this isn't really what I'm looking for. Like to have a run like this of original stories and original storytelling, like that's something that I really appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Not many studios get to do that.
No, you got to keep the lights on, right? So
Luckily enough for like Studio Ghibli, like their movies are almost always celebrated, at least in Japan, right?
it didn't do super well in the West, I don't think, just because
No.
apparently Harvey Weinstein was super butthurt about not getting to cut not getting to cut those 20 minutes out that he actually nuked the film's like marketing.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of is pretty par for the course from what I understand. It's like working with Harvey Weinstein to be like,
Yeah,
honestly.
fair enough.
He
So
was a pretty vindictive boss, as I understand it.
yeah, among other things. So yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so effects and filming. This was made for $23 million,
Okay.
which is pretty wild. Like that's the most expensive anime at the time that it was ever released. It was probably one of the more expensive Japanese films ever made at that point in time as well. Like, even Godzilla minus one from a couple years ago was only made for like, I don't know, $15 million or something
I
like
know,
that,
right?
which is wild.
Yeah.
So, and it takes a long time to like make these kind of movies, right? Like, and this is kind of a neat movie too, because this is at a crossroads in animation styles. Miyazaki up until this point was strictly doing hand-drawn animation, and this is kind of the first movie where they decided to incorporate like some computer generated imagery, and then they also were using like other digital techniques that they were kind of toying with at the time. So like they're kind of mixing and matching. Like I think there's like 4 different styles going on in this movie.
It is
And
like I feel like if you're an animation fan, like you would get to have a field day with this movie.
yeah,
Like or even a student of animation, like you'd probably go nuts watching this movie.
yeah, because this is like a very pivotal movie, right? Like this was one of the last really hand drawn first kind of movies. Like all of the background of this movie is very hand drawn, and it's beautiful. Like the colors all kind of really pop in this movie. Like I was really chewing on the scenery at bits of this movie. So apparently the Iron Town is based on metalworking settlements in China.
Oh, okay.
Actually. So the similar period of time, but that was more Chinese inspired. But I think Miyazaki was pretty interested in history and a student of history. Like a lot of his films kind of take from previous fables or like stories of the past and kind of incorporate them into his narratives.
I will say he does seem to be like a very singular vision, you know? Like I
Yeah.
feel like you could put one of his movies on and you're like, okay, this is definitely his movie, right?
Well, and they all have like there's always a social commentary in his stories, right? Out of the 3 that I've seen of his now, like this one to me has the strongest themes of the 3 movies.
Well, it's interesting watching this after Castle in the Sky, which was like 12 or 15 years earlier than this. We were just like, all right, so like you are an auteur. Like
Yeah.
you have these things that you're concerned with and they just keep appearing in your work.
Yeah, you can't get them out of your head.
Yeah, which I think is true for all great artists, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Wes Anderson lately, and that definitely speaks to that.
You're like, again, Wes, really? Like,
I'm along for the ride at this point.
yeah.
So they hired 5 art directors to make this movie, which is crazy.
Fuck off. Yeah. That's a lot.
And each one kind of handled different elements of the movie. I think Miyazaki himself, though, was like kind of the overarching director, and there's something like, I think he touched like, I don't know, 75% of all of the like the images of the movie, like frames of the movie, which is insane.
I think I read something somewhere like a long time ago that like he supervised like every frame of the movie.
Yeah, but like I think he literally did that, and like he like touched up like 75% of them, or like did them himself on that many.
Christ.
Which is again, that's insane.
Maybe that's why he's so grumpy.
He is known for being a little bit of a grump.
Yeah.
You are
Well,
correct.
hey, aren't we all?
It's tough. It's tough. It's tough being like really, really good at something, and you at the end of the day you do have to rely on other people to get you across the finish line, because or else you would never be able to complete something like this. But
Mm-hmm.
you're also like, if you're a controlling person like that, like there's kind of that balance between giving up control and getting something done.
Right. Like, why aren't you fuckers as talented as I am? Right.
Put differently, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one I was talking about this earlier. Mononoke means angry or vengeful spirit. Basically, in Japanese grammar, they would have put Mononoke first, so it would have been Mononoke Princess, so like the angry princess.
Hmm.
And so they kind of left it as Princess Mononoke instead of like directly translating it to like angry princess.
Hmm.
The prince actually does call her Mononoke a couple times in the movie, but most of the time calls her San, which again, that's where I was kind of like getting confused, because I was like, wait, are we referencing another person here, or like
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was also like, I don't think she's a princess either. Like, I don't recognize her authority.
nice. Score of the movie, pretty solid score. Like, this is by Joe Hisaishi, who's scored most of Miyazaki's movies, I believe. So I think that if you're into the Miyazaki movies, like, you're gonna feel right at home with the score of this one as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's more kind of like background score. Like, I wouldn't say it jumped out as me or popped out as me as like one of the highlights of the movie, honestly. But
Yeah, I agree.
it's kind of like there to set the mood. It's kind of like in the background, and you're not supposed to notice it, I think.
Yeah, it's very ambient.
Yeah. So look back at the times. You already mentioned how things played out with Miramax and the distribution of this in the US. However, though, apparently, originally Harvey Weinstein asked Quentin Tarantino to write the English adaptation of the dialogue. He turned it down, and Neil Gaiman ended up writing the dialogue of the movie
Yeah,
instead.
Neil fucking Gaiman, another totally not controversial person.
Yeah, we're just really stepping in it on
I
this episode.
know. It's kind of funny. I think apparently though, for some reason, Neil Gaiman was not given credit at the time, and it was only like 15 or 20 years later that he confirmed that he actually wrote the English dub.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The thing with that is, though, is that again, he made pretty like significant changes to the story and like the dialogue. And I always kind of wondered that too, right? Because like, in different languages, you'll have different words that might have like not have a direct translation, or like a word that might mean like a sense or a feeling or like an idea that it would take way more words in the English language to be able to explain. And you have to like condense that, right? Because if you're not doing subtitles, then it has to kind of fit into the same structure as the film is.
Yeah, that's what I was saying last week. I do think localizing an anime has got to be like a hugely thankless task.
Yeah.
But it must also be really interesting too.
If you're into languages, right? Like, and it's kind of like you're essentially adapting a story, right? And also putting your own spin on it in a way.
I guess so. I actually, you know what? If there are any studios who need an anime localized, I am available. I'll make some time. It sounds kind
You
of fun.
have I guess Neil Gaiman probably is not fluent in Japanese. If I had to guess, so I guess it probably does get translated first, right? And then you kind of look at it and you like kind of put together the pieces of it.
I'm not really sure, but I probably, but I'm not. I don't want to talk to Neil Gaiman to find out either.
That's fair,
He'll
actually.
probably tie me up and do things to me. But
Oh,
anyways,
man. You did mention as well that Weinstein didn't want to cut this, or wanted to cut this, and Miyazaki was like, "You're not cutting this." So the Studio Ghibli producer sent Weinstein a katana sword that said "no cuts" on it, on the blade. So that was his gift of like, you cannot do it, and that like they did agree like to not do that in their agreement when they purchased the movie. Or the
you know
film.
what? And it's so weird because like I don't want to agree with Weinstein, but like I do kind of feel like, yeah, my instinct was like, oh, he could get 20 minutes out of this shit. Like, but then you know what? I'm gonna open my door tomorrow and there's gonna be a katana sitting on my porch that just says "no cuts."
Yeah. Uh, I think this is actually a really interesting quote that Miyazaki had when they screened this for the first time at TIFF for the English dub. He said, with Princess Mononoke, I intentionally threw out all the rules of entertainment movie making, which is why it will take some time for a true evaluation of this film to emerge. I hope you will enjoy all of the ridiculously long 2 hours and 13 minutes. And that's kind of where I ended up landing with this one as well. Like, I need more time to evaluate this. And this is sometimes also like the unfortunate result of like us doing this podcast, right? Is like we only get to see a movie once and then we've got to record and then we're on to the next one, and I'm watching other
Yeah,
movies.
at the same time though, I have to say, and this is sort of like what we talked about with 8.5 however many years ago, it's like at the same time though, like, is it our fault if the movie lands so badly?
And again, this isn't a movie necessarily for me.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a movie for me either. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not really a fault of the movie or a fault of us. Sometimes it's just kind of like, you're just like, well, that was weird. All right.
Yeah. That's kind of exactly it, right?
Yeah.
So legacy in the movie, obviously you mentioned like that this movie has a strong influence on the Legend of Zelda video game series. Also, Avatar, James Cameron citing this is like one of the most influential movies for the Avatar franchise, which obviously is also makes a lot of sense.
I definitely see it.
I think that this movie is going to connect with very environmentally conscious people, and it's not to say that you and I aren't environmentally conscious, but the movie could have just gone on with it, in a sense too. Right?
Yeah,
like we got bogged down with some other details in the movie,
some meaningless shit.
But I mean, this is still considered like one of the all-time great movies ever made. Like, so IMDb, this is rated number 82, and Letterboxd, it's rated number 72 of all time.
Yeah, so I guess you and I just again are in the unenviable position of not liking one of the best movies of all time.
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
like, there are people who hate probably most of my top 4 movies.
That's fair.
When we get into doing our top 100 later this year,
which is coming up.
It is coming up. It is coming up.
I'm
excited. There's been a couple movies in the last couple months where it's like, it's fun too, right? Because you don't. There's movies that like you haven't thought about for a long time, and then somebody will offhand mention something or reference something, and you'd be like, oh yeah,
that's making it onto the list.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, like, other movies get cut off, and you're like, oh, that's sad. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah,
but
oh well.
So this movie is the 4th longest animated film ever made. Allegedly, I think there's been a couple movies, the animated movies, the last couple years that might kind of be on this longest list now. I think all of the old movies as well are Japanese films. There's Final Yamato from 1983, which was 165 minutes.
Whoa.
The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya from 2010, which was 162 minutes. And The Tale of the Princess Kaguya from 2013, which is 138 minutes.
Okay, so there are longer animated movies, certainly.
There are. Not many, and most of them came after this movie.
Okay.
As you got into like the digital studios. I kind of think that the most recent animated Spider-Man movie, they probably were planning on making one movie and then ran out of time or budget.
Yeah, Across the Spider-Verse. It's funny because like I feel like I saw Across the Spider-Verse 2 years ago, and I feel like I can't formulate my thoughts on that movie until I see the third one.
Your view is in limbo.
Yeah, kind of. I remember just sitting there in the theater just being like, huh. And then just like getting up and leaving, bewildered and annoyed. Yeah.
You definitely were not the only one.
Yeah. So
I think a lot of people thought that movie, was going to conclude.
And then it just didn't. Like All
right. And now we're 2 years on.
Yeah. Isn't it coming out later this year or something? Maybe
I think it's coming out like maybe next year. I think there's 2 Spider-Man movies, and they're coming out both next year.
Okay.
I think the live action, like, next Tom Holland movie is coming out as well.
Okay. Well, shit. We'll be spoiled for spiders next year.
And Spiders Man.
Yes, indeed.
Confession, I've never seen a Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, apart from, like, the ones that he's been in for the MCU.
You know what, man? I don't think you're missing that much.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I've been listening to some discussion about, like, even the most recent live Spider-Man movie where like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield come
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
I've kind of heard that there's been like a little bit of like a critical reappraisal that maybe that movie isn't all that great.
I've actually heard that, like, from what little I've gleaned, the discourse is that Deadpool and Wolverine is better on a second viewing, which I can attest to because I saw it twice and I liked it more the second time. And then No Way Home is actually worse the second time. Of course, I don't know. Like, it's hard to. I mean, it's kind of hard to go back and watch Deadpool and Wolverine with all this shit going on with Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, but
How weird is that? How surreal. What a world. What a time.
you know what? It's funny. I didn't look into it, but over the holidays, a family member explained it to me, and I was like, oh, weird. Oh,
gross.
gross.
Oh.
So, I mean,
Nice.
maybe that will then vindicate No Way Home because we don't like Ryan Reynolds anymore.
And speaking of movies that I think might get better on a second rewatch, this one.
Yeah.
So, personal reviews, the partner factor. I don't know that we have too much to add here. I feel like we put all of our cards on the table while we were watching.
Yeah. I watched this alone, not on a date.
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of like, eh.
And it's funny that, you know, independent of Jess and I, like, you got off the train at the same time as we did.
This
like,
is one of the few times we, like, fully synced up.
All three of us, and all kind of at the exact same moment of the film, too. Where it was like,
now, you know what? If I were a director and all three people were unanimous about that, I'd be like, oh, shit, I need to fix my movie.
which is a little unfortunate. Because, again, the first act is super strong.
So,
And the world building is fantastic. It gets a little too bloated.
it's a little muddled.
I will be coming back to this one in a few years, and I will be doing the sub first. I think that going forward, I'm going to be approaching Miyazaki movies with the sub rather than the dub.
I feel the same way.
Again, I think that Studio Ghibli movies just need some time to marinate, and I think this one is one that really needs some time to marinate with me.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're being a little more
though.
charitable than I am. I'm just kind of like, yeah, I didn't get it. Sorry.
That's the thing, though, is I got it. I got it. There's just a moment where there's just a little too much going on.
Yeah, let me rephrase. There's just kind of a moment where I'm just like, you know what? This ain't for me. Like, I'm out. Not even that. Just like, yeah, like what you just said.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that happens sometimes, right?
I'm just kind of surprised you and I fully agreed on something.
It's not often that happens with
Yeah.
our movies. Especially movies that we end up, one of us has a controversial take on. Like,
We have the
on
same
the same
controversial take. Yeah.
yeah, we're in unison on this one.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. I think that's Princess Mononoke, as best as you and I can talk about this one, both being somewhat biased, maybe against this one in this case.
Yeah. So, I mean, go see it if you want. Or or don't. I don't know.
I'm not your father.
Yeah. Not yet. But you can call me daddy.
Ooh. Okay, well, I guess that's it for this episode. I don't know what we're doing next. I think next on the list I had foreign movie, which obviously that's all we've been doing. So I think maybe what we'll do is just like one of us will decide on like a foreign movie that we've just been like absolutely itching to watch or talk about.
Right.
Because there's a few on my top 100 list that I don't think we've gotten to yet.
Maybe we'll just do something out there, you know?
Yeah, we'll see.
One for the boys.
Yeah,
One for the lads.
So yeah, we'll see what we come up with. And then after that, I think we're getting close to the top 5 best movies of the 2020s so far.
Yeah. So if you have any recommendations for us, feel free to chime in.
Yeah. I mean, I feel pretty good about my list, honestly, at this point. Like, I've kind of had in my head my top 5, top 10 of the 2020s. Like, they kind of come in fits and jerks too. Like, we've kind of been spoiled like on and off again with good movies. Like, it feels like this year I haven't seen a whole lot that's been interesting me. Although I'd really like to go out and see Sinners.
Yeah, that's supposed to be good, right?
It's supposed to be really
apparently everything's bombing though this year. So
yeah, but that's also again because some of these movies that they put out haven't been all that great this year.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if it's like delayed response to a lot of the strikes that happened a couple of years ago, and like this is how long it takes to process movies, and it's just like, you know, we're hitting the bottom of the barrel right now.
Right. These are all the movies that were languishing with no actors or writers working on them.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if that's the case.
Apparently that Robert Pattinson movie was pretty good.
Oh, Mickey 17. Yeah. I think that one even had mixed thoughts and
Oh, really?
feelings about it. Yeah.
My roommate said he liked it. So,
Oh yeah. Well,
you know,
your roommate can't be wrong.
that's my Rotten Tomatoes scores. I asked my roommate what he thought. And he
Fair
gives me a
enough.
thumbs up or a thumbs down, and I'm like, very good.
I didn't even know he'd already watched that one. I'll
Yeah,
have to
well,
ask him about it. He has a girlfriend now, and he doesn't want to go watch movies with either of us.
I know, what an asshole.
All right, let's wrap her up. We'll see you next time. Tell your dad.
Bye.